You think you need more discipline, but what you really need is a different way your brain prices effort. Right now, your tasks feel heavy because your prediction system labels them as costly and uncertain. Change that label, and the weight drops. No hype, no caffeine spikes, just a clean neurological shift that makes work feel near, certain, and worth it. I'll show you a simple structure that flips your effort valuation so focus becomes easier and staying on task feels natural. Here's the promise. In this session, you'll learn how to create tiny, guaranteed progress signals that trigger a positive prediction update. That update nudges dopamine just enough to sustain approach, not avoidance. You'll run a quick experiment, feel the ease effect in real time, and then stack the method into your day. This isn't about grinding harder. It's about designing certainty into your workflow so your brain stops overcharging you for effort and starts rewarding you for each step forward. Stay with me. By the end, you'll walk away with a repeatable loop that turns tedious work into a sequence of quick wins that compound. You'll stop negotiating with yourself and start moving, because the path will feel lighter, shorter, and obvious. The effort illusion. Your brain is not blocking you. It is protecting you from a perceived bad trade. When a task looks vague, distant, or likely to waste energy, your valuation system inflates the cost before you even begin. That heavy feeling you call lack of willpower is often a pricing error, not a character flaw. The mind predicts low certainty, high effort, and delayed payoff, then marks the action as expensive. You feel the weight and hesitate because the internal math says the odds are poor. Change the prediction and the price drops. Start there, and focus stops feeling like a fight. Think of effort like a price tag attached to the next step. The tag is set by how clear the outcome is, how near it feels, and how controllable it seems. If the step is fuzzy, the tag skyrockets. If the step is certain and close, the tag falls. Your job is not to summon more force. It is to make the next step undeniably specific and visibly consequential. The moment your brain detects a guaranteed micro-outcome, it updates the forecast. The task no longer looks like a gamble. Approach becomes the default because the trade feels fair. You can test this quickly. Take a piece of work you have been avoiding and specify a single visible outcome you can produce in a short window, like a renamed file, a saved draft paragraph, a compiled test, a labeled dataset slice, a reconciled line item. Make it small enough to guarantee completion, but clear enough to be noticeable. Announce it to yourself in concrete terms. I will end with this exact artifact. Then begin. What you are doing is not tricking yourself. You are feeding your prediction system reliable evidence that starting will produce a certain result. Certainty is what lowers perceived cost. The sensation of heaviness starts to thin because the brain now expects near controllable progress. This is the core misunderstanding about willpower. People assume they must feel strong before they act. In reality, action becomes easier when the brain expects a high probability of quick progress. The expectation itself is fuel. When the path ahead is defined by small, assured outcomes, you need less motivational push. You are not pushing a boulder uphill. You are stepping from stone to stone across a stream you can see. The distance hasn't changed, but the travel feels safer and shorter. That is the effort illusion breaking. There is a second layer to this. Your brain continuously compares what it predicted would happen with what actually happens. If the outcome is slightly better than predicted, the system flags the step as worthwhile. You feel a small lift and want to continue. If the outcome is worse or uncertain, the price climbs again. This is why oversized goals backfire at the start. They create an expectation gap that is difficult to close quickly, so each step feels expensive and flimsy. Scale the first step down to something you can deliver without fail, and you generate a reliable win. The positive surprise can be tiny. What matters is that it is certain and visible. That is enough to adjust the valuation toward approach. You might be wondering if this is just mood management. It is not. It is a structural change in how your task is represented. Ambiguity turns work into a risky bet. Concreteness turns the same work into a near-term exchange. Your attention system prioritizes what is near, clear, and controllable. Your motivation system sustains what repeatedly proves itself worth the energy. When you deliberately create quick, guaranteed, visible outcomes, you align with both systems. Focus becomes less about resisting distraction and more about continuing a gainful transaction. The relief you feel is not imaginary. It is the cost signal dropping as certainty rises. So the first move is simple and profound. Stop asking for more willpower. Start redesigning the next 30 to 90 seconds of effort so it cannot miss. Define the micro outcome, make it visible, begin, and let the brain update its price. Once you experience that lighter sensation, lock it in by cueing the next guaranteed step before you stop. This is how momentum is built without strain. You recalibrate the price of action in your favor, and the work that used to feel heavy becomes the obvious next step. The certainty switch. Uncertainty is the tax draining your focus before you even spend a minute working. Your brain tries to protect you from wasted effort, so it charges an upfront premium whenever the next step looks vague, far away, or dependent on too many moving parts. Remove that ambiguity and the price drops on the spot. Certainty converts a task from a risky bet into a near-term exchange, and that single shift makes staying on task feel natural rather than forced. You don't need to feel more motivated to begin. You need to make beginning unmistakably worth it in the next 90 seconds, with proof you can see. Here's the essence. Your attention prioritizes what is near, clear, and controllable. When you define a micro outcome that sits squarely inside your control window, your valuation system updates the cost downward. Rename the draft to the final convention and save it. Extract one crisp insight and park it in a dated note. Render the opening seconds of a sequence and export to a clearly labeled folder. Reconcile a single line item and mark it complete with a visible tag. These aren't trivial chores. They're engineered signals that progress is certain here. The moment your brain trusts that signal, dread recedes and action stops feeling like a gamble. Certainty compresses time perception. Ambiguity stretches minutes into a slow, heavy drag because the endpoint is fuzzy. A clear, guaranteed endpoint tightens time, and you feel that as momentum. Not hype, not adrenaline, just a sequence of completions that stack and invite the next step. That stacking changes your self-talk. Instead of negotiating with the task, you're executing a series of small agreements you already know you can keep. Confidence rises because it's earned in real time, and your effort feels proportionate to the payoff you can actually see. Design matters. A guaranteed outcome must be specific, visible the moment it exists, and independent of external gatekeepers. If your next step requires approvals, long data pulls, or fragile integrations, your certainty collapses and the cost climbs again. Keep the unit small enough to be inevitable under normal conditions, yet meaningful enough to count as progress. You're tuning the entry point so your predictive system can say yes without argument. Once that yes is reliable, complexity can scale later without reintroducing the heaviness that blocks you now. There is a useful cadence to flipping the switch. Set one guaranteed outcome for the opening minute or two, complete it, and immediately pre-commit the next guaranteed outcome before you pause. This creates a chain of near-term certainties that your brain treats like a stable path. The effect is subtle and powerful. You feel steadier, distractions lose their pull, and the urge to switch tasks fades because the current path is the safest, clearest bet available. What used to require pep talks now runs on predictable proof. You might worry that certainty shrinks ambition. It doesn't. It fortifies the approach needed to reach it. Big goals fail at the entry point because the first step is priced too high. The certainty switch lowers that price without diluting the destination. Each small, controllable completion is a down payment that renews your willingness to continue. As you chain them, the task stops feeling like a cliff and starts feeling like a staircase. The work hasn't changed, but your nervous system recognizes a path it can trust, and that's when focus feels easier than you expected. Micro wins that move the needle. Tiny, guaranteed wins are the cleanest way to convert hesitation into forward motion because they reshape what your brain expects will happen next and make continuation feel like the obvious choice. A micro win is not busy work. It is a precise, visible outcome that proves progress in under a few minutes and leaves a concrete trace you can see and trust. When you stack these proof points, you create a bias toward action that doesn't rely on hype. Your nervous system marks the path as safe and valuable, so you keep going without the constant need for self-negotiation. Design a micro win to be inarguable. It should exist independent of opinion, be immediately verifiable, and meaningfully reduce uncertainty for the next step. a single paragraph distilled into a summary note with a date stamp, a function stub saved with a tested signature, a 5-second render exported to a Today folder, a reconciled line in your finance sheet with a green marker. These outcomes are small, but they carry informational weight. They signal that the system is moving and that your effort is producing certainties, not guesses. The internal resistance drops because the next decision is informed by proof rather than hope. The power here is not just psychological comfort, it is momentum engineering. Each micro-win slightly exceeds the brain's expectation of how hard the next step will feel. That tiny positive surprise nudges you forward and makes it easier to re-engage after any interruption. You begin to prefer staying on task because the current path offers frequent confirmations that you are winning the game you're playing. Distractions lose their shine when the main activity pays out in reliable increments you can count and review. Make your micro-wins cumulative. Let each one reveal or unlock the next action. The summary note becomes the outline seed. The function stub becomes the test that passes. The 5-second render becomes the quality benchmark for the next 10 seconds. The reconciled line becomes a cleared category. This chaining effect turns progress into a visible staircase. You don't need to feel inspired to climb one more step when the next step is already cut, lit, and close. Your energy shifts from pushing yourself to simply continuing what is already working. Be careful not to dilute the concept. A micro-win is not an excuse to procrastinate with comfortable side tasks. It must reduce the core task's risk or ambiguity. If it doesn't make the main path easier to continue, it isn't a win, it's a detour. Keep asking one question to guard the standard. After I complete this, is the next meaningful action clearer, faster, or safer? If the answer is yes, you're moving the needle. If not, tighten the definition until the outcome directly advances the work that matters. Close each session by setting up tomorrow's first micro-win and leaving it half-primed. Name the file you'll touch, place the link at the top of your notes, preload the test you'll run, stage the clip you'll extend. The next entry point should be so clear and certain that you can begin without thinking. This is how you build consistency that looks like discipline from the outside but feels like momentum from the inside. You're not waiting for motivation. You're creating a chain of small, undeniable victories that make the next step irresistible. The 90-second ease test. Set a tight window and prove to your brain that progress is not a gamble. That's the purpose of the 90-second ease test. A live, on-timer experiment that lowers the perceived cost of action by delivering a guaranteed, visible outcome on cue. Pick a task you've been avoiding and frame a micro-outcome that is undeniable. Create a blank outline file with 3 section headers, extract one concrete insight into a dated note, render the first 3 seconds of a clip to a labeled folder, run a single unit test, and log the result at the top of your scratch pad. Start the timer. Do only that. When the artifact appears, your nervous system receives a clean signal. The path is safe, near, and controllable. Why this works is simple. Your resistance isn't powered by laziness. It's powered by uncertainty. The timer gives you a boundary, the micro-outcome gives you a target, and the visible artifact gives you proof. Proof collapses ambiguity. The heavy feeling fades because the brain recalculates the price of the next minute as lower than before. You're no longer paying in dread. You're paying in small, predictable steps that convert directly into progress. That shift is the ease you're looking for, and you can manufacture it on demand. Run the test twice in a row to deepen the effect. The first pass breaks the stall. The second pass establishes a pattern your brain can predict and trust. Keep the steps identical in structure, but different in content to avoid novelty dependence. Outline file created, then summary note saved. First render exported, then unit test logged. 2 completions within 3 minutes teach your system that starting is safe and continuation is profitable. You'll feel your posture toward the task change from pushing to proceeding, which is exactly the sensation of effort becoming lighter. Guard against 3 common mistakes. Don't choose outcomes that depend on other people or fragile inputs. Dependency reintroduces uncertainty, and the heaviness returns. Don't inflate the test into a tiny project. Bloat erases inevitability. And don't make the artifact abstract. If you cannot point to it, your brain can't bank it. The standard is visible, verifiable, inside your control. When you meet that standard, the test pays out immediately. As soon as the second 90 seconds ends, preset the next guaranteed outcome and leave it staged. Name the file you'll touch, paste the exact command you'll run, place the reference link at the top of your note. You're laying a rail for the next entry, so tomorrow's start is frictionless. This is where the test becomes a system. You're not chasing motivation. You're teaching your brain that it can count on a win at the moment of engagement, and that expectation lowers perceived effort every time you come back. Use this test whenever work feels heavier than it should. It's a reset button for your valuation system. The goal is not to do more in 90 seconds. It's to change the prediction about the next 90 minutes. When the first step is certain and the proof is instant, the rest of the session inherits that ease. That is how you convert focus from a willpower battle into a designed sequence of obvious steps. And once you can trigger ease on command, you'll stop waiting to feel ready and start moving because the path is clearly worth it. The persistence circuit. Staying on a task is not about gritting your teeth. It's about how your brain maintains a goal when the reward is clear, near, and credible. Think of persistence as a circuit that compares the value of continuing with the value of switching. When the next step is uncertain or the payoff feels far, switching wins. When the path is reliable and progress is provable, continuing wins. You feel this as ease. The circuit favors the track that offers the highest ratio of certainty to effort. Your job is to feed it the right signals, so staying becomes the smartest move, not the hardest one. The circuit needs 3 ingredients to lock on. First, a well-defined goal representation that is specific enough to guide the next action without debate. Vague intentions leak energy. A crisp representation compresses choice and eliminates internal negotiations. Second, proximity cues that make the reward feel near, not theoretical. Nearness is psychological as much as physical. A saved draft, a passing test, an exported render, a reconciled entry. These are markers that the reward is within reach. Third, controllability signals that confirm the outcome depends on your action right now, not on external permissions or random luck. When those 3 conditions are present, the brain codes the path as safe to persist and the urge to deviate shrinks. Design your workflow to feed that circuit repeatedly. Start a session by instantiating the goal in concrete form. Title the file with the final naming pattern, sketch the skeleton of the section headings, write the test you intend to pass, place the checklist at the top of your note with the first box already ticked by your opening move. This is not ceremony. It's the creation of a stable goal object your attention can orbit. Then add proximity. Schedule a visible micro outcome inside the next few minutes that proves you are moving toward the goal, not circling it. Finally, confirm controllability. Strip dependencies from the first actions so they live entirely within your power window. With those steps, the persistence calculation tilts in your favor before the hard part begins. Once engaged, keep the circuit fed with rhythmic confirmations. Every few minutes, produce a small artifact that narrows the distance to the next meaningful checkpoint. The artifact doesn't need to impress anyone. It needs to be undeniable. A paragraph locked, a function signature stable, a clip extended by 5 seconds at the target quality, a category in your ledger cleared to 0. Each confirmation is a pulse telling your system the approach strategy is paying off. The brain loves patterns that pay. You will feel the pull to continue strengthen as the pulses arrive on schedule. Interruptions happen, so embed re-entry cues. Leave an explicit line at the top of your workspace labeled Next Action with the exact keystroke, command, or sentence start you will do upon return. Park the cursor where the action begins. Stage a file path so one click launches the next step. This makes reactivation near effortless, preserving the continuity that persistence depends on. If you return to ambiguity, the circuit has to recalculate from scratch, and switching regains its appeal. If you return to certainty, persistence resumes as if nothing happened. Guard the circuit from 2 common drains. First, split attention. Context switching spikes the cost of staying because it erodes proximity and controllability in both tasks. Protect single-threaded blocks for critical segments and push everything else to edges. Second, oversized leaps. When you try to jump too far between confirmations, the path stops feeling reliable and your system hedges its bets. Shorten the gap. Keep confirmations close enough that your brain can predict the next success with confidence. The less hedging required, the more naturally you keep going. As momentum builds, expand the horizon without breaking the pattern. Increase the size of checkpoints only after the smaller ones are automatic. The circuit scales on proof. If you maintain a steady rhythm of clear next actions, near rewards, and controllable steps, persistence becomes a background process that runs on its own. You will notice a quieter mind, fewer micro-arguments, and a steadier pace. This is the sensation of a well-fed persistence circuit. The path ahead feels obvious, the work feels proportionate, and stopping feels premature because continuing keeps paying. That's not brute force. That's good design doing what willpower alone rarely can. Effort pricing versus motivation. Myths. You've been told to rev yourself up, to chase motivation like a spark that lights the fire. That story is backward. Your brain isn't waiting for a pep talk. It's running a cost-benefit calculation. When a task is priced as high effort, uncertain payoff, and distant reward, your system conserves energy by resisting. When the task is priced as low effort, reliable payoff, and near reward, your system releases energy to engage. What feels like a motivation problem is usually a pricing problem. Fix the price and the behavior follows. Keep the wrong price, and no speech to yourself will stick. Effort pricing is built from three components: clarity, proximity, and controllability. Clarity asks, do you know exactly what to do next? Proximity asks, does the payoff feel near enough to experience quickly? Controllability asks, does the outcome depend mostly on your immediate actions? If any of these drop, perceived cost rises. That's why vague directives, distant milestones, and dependency-heavy steps feel heavy. Your brain doesn't hate work, it hates bets it can't price. When you increase clarity, pull the payoff closer, and shrink dependencies, the internal meter slides toward action. You feel this as relief and a natural pull to begin. Motivation myths tend to worship intensity. Get fired up, blast music, make it epic. Intensity can start a session, but it rarely sustains one. What sustains focus is predictable progress. Predictability comes from designing steps, so their outcomes are nearly guaranteed. That's why the micro wins and the certainty switch matter. They don't just make you feel good, they recalibrate price. When price drops, the friction to start and continue drops with it. You didn't become a different person. You changed the market conditions in your mind and the behavior updated to the new price. Consider two starts to the same task. Version 1. Write the report. High ambiguity, delayed payoff, heavy dependencies, the price spikes. Version 2. Open report file, paste the 3-section headers, and insert one quote you'll use. Clarity is high, the payoff is near, and you control all steps. The price collapses. After you complete the second version, the next step becomes cheaper because the path is already warm. This is why momentum feels like magic when it's actually math. Each proof of progress lowers the projected cost of the next move, turning continuation into the obvious decision. The myth also shows up in how people treat goals. Oversized early targets look impressive, but often balloon the cost because they fail the certainty test. If you promise yourself a massive output at the start, your brain anticipates a high chance of partial failure, and it prices the attempt as expensive. The smarter move is to scale the first commitment to something you can deliver without fail that meaningfully advances the core objective. Small does not mean trivial, it means inevitable and relevant. Relevance is non-negotiable. The step must reduce uncertainty for the next meaningful action. That's how price drops without diluting ambition. There's a practical loop to lock this in. Before each session, set a guaranteed outcome that is visible and controllable. Complete it quickly to collapse ambiguity. Immediately stage the next guaranteed outcome. This sequence keeps the effective price low across the session. If you hit a snag, don't force motivation. Reduce the price again. Shrink the step, tighten the control, pull the payoff closer. When the price drops, your system re-engages. You don't need to feel inspired to act. You need to make acting a sensible trade right now. This lens reframes discipline. Discipline is not heroic resistance to feeling. It's consistent management of perceived cost. The people who seem tireless aren't superhuman. They've learned to present their brain with actions that clear the clarity, proximity, and controllability bar over and over. As a result, their default is to continue, because continuing is consistently priced right. That's available to you today. Stop arguing with yourself about motivation. Start auditing steps for price. Lower it with design, not force. When the price is fair, your brain stops fighting and starts moving. That's not a myth. That's how effort becomes sustainable. The 7-1-7 Certainty Loop. This is the engine that turns ease into momentum. You will work in 2 focused blocks of 7 minutes, separated by 1 minute, dedicated to a guaranteed, visible micro-win. The first 7 sets the path and builds pressure toward proof. The 1 locks in certainty with an artifact you can point to. The second 7 capitalizes on that certainty to extend progress without strain. Simple on paper, powerful in practice, because it repeatedly tells your brain the same message. This path pays. Keep going. Start with 7 minutes of tightly scoped work aimed at a specific, pre-chosen checkpoint. Not an outcome that depends on approval or luck, but a step you can close under normal conditions. Keep it framed as a single action chain with 1 visible end. Outline headers finalized in the document, a clean function signature saved, a 10-second render exported to a dated folder, 3 transactions reconciled and tagged. You're not chasing perfection here. You're pushing 1 domino that must fall. The goal of this first 7 is not to finish everything. It's to set up a result that can be sealed during the next minute with certainty. When the timer flips to 1 minute, shift into proof mode. Seal the checkpoint. Export the clip, save and timestamp the note, run and capture the passing test. Mark the reconciled entries complete in a visible color. This minute is sacred. No extra thinking, no scope creep, no shiny objects. You produce the artifact that proves the last 7 minutes paid off. That artifact is your leverage. It collapses ambiguity and reduces the price of continuing, because your brain now has concrete evidence that your effort converts into real deliverables. The heaviness drops, not from motivation, but from an updated prediction. Then go back into 7 minutes of focused continuation. Extend from the artifact you just created. Build the next slice, pass the next test, render the next block, reconcile the next cluster. You're riding the certainty you just manufactured. Because you start this second 7 already holding proof, your attention resists switching. The path ahead looks shorter and safer, so you naturally choose to continue. This is where you feel the shift from pushing to being pulled forward. The loop works because it manages psychology and logistics simultaneously. Psychologically, it creates frequent positive confirmations. Logistically, it produces a chain of artifacts that make handoffs, re-entry, and quality checks effortless. By the time you complete 2 loops, you don't just feel better. You have evidence, files created, tests logged, timestamps, exports, reconciliations. That evidence is a scoreboard, and a live scoreboard is the fastest way to quiet self-doubt. Keep the standards tight to protect the effect. The first 7 ends at a clear micro outcome. The 1-minute window produces a visible artifact. The second 7 extends the exact same thread. If you break the thread, you reintroduce uncertainty and the loop loses strength. If you inflate the goals, you jeopardize the guarantee and the price spikes again. The discipline is in the sizing and the sequencing. You're not proving you can work long, you're proving you can convert effort into certainty repeatedly. Use this loop in pairs or triplets across a session. After each 7-1-7, write a single line at the top of your workspace labeled Next Move and place the cursor exactly where you will act. The next time you sit down, you fall straight into motion because the entry is obvious and the first proof is close. Over days, the compounding effect is clear. You accumulate artifacts that map the terrain you've already crossed, and your brain begins to expect that the next stretch will pay at the same rate. That expectation is the real win. It's the quiet belief that starting will feel easy and continuing will feel smart. Once that belief is installed, the loop becomes less of a technique and more of a baseline. You aren't forcing focus. You're following a path that you know converts effort into results on demand. Partial reveal, full commitment continuation becomes easy when the future stops feeling hypothetical. A partial reveal is a planned peek at progress that compresses psychological distance and makes the next action feel like the obvious move. You pre-build a tiny slice of the outcome and schedule it to surface mid-run, not at the end. That reveal is a contract renewal with your own brain, proof that the path is unfolding and that finishing is closer than it looks. It's not hype. It's a controlled disclosure that converts doubt into direction by showing that the work is already taking shape under your hands. Here's the principle. Ambiguity expands distance. Visibility collapses it. When you reveal a fragment of the final form at the right moment, you change how far the finish line feels. A clean intro paragraph on the page, a stable component rendering exactly as intended, the first 10 seconds of a sequence playing at target quality, the initial chart with correct axes and labels. The fragment is intentionally incomplete, yet unmistakably part of the real thing. Your brain recognizes the silhouette of completion and updates the timeline. Near, not far. That shift unlocks commitment without brute force. Design your partial reveals to be undeniable and direction-setting. Undeniable means verifiable on sight, not a hidden checkmark. Direction setting means the fragment determines what must come next, removing decision friction. A finished cold open dictates the next section. A passing unit test dictates the next case. A properly timed voiceover bed dictates the next visual beat. A reconciled category dictates the next reconciliation cluster. The reveal should not just say we're moving, it should tell you where to step next. Reduce choices, increase pull. Timing matters. Release the partial reveal at the point where the session's energy naturally dips, not at the start and not at the end. Mid-block is ideal, when the initial novelty has faded, but before fatigue wins. The reveal arrives as a small, positive surprise. Better than predicted, sooner than expected. That surprise nudges engagement upward and tilts the cost-benefit toward continuing. If you reveal too late, it becomes a victory lap with no compounding effect. Too early, and you waste leverage you could use when resistance rises. Guard the integrity of the reveal. It must come from the core of the work, not from peripheral polish. Otherwise, you risk a cosmetic high that doesn't advance the task. Keep it embedded in the main thread and make the handoff immediate. The moment you reveal, capture the next move in one line and start it before you pause. This is how the reveal locks commitment, by transforming admiration into action in the same breath. Looking at progress should lead to extending progress with no negotiation in between. Use partial reveals to bridge difficult transitions. When shifting from planning to execution, from drafting to editing, from assembly to quality control, pre-build a small element of the next phase and schedule its reveal at the transition boundary. This reduces the shock of mode switching. Your brain is not asked to leap into the unknown. It is invited to continue something that is already alive. Transitions stop feeling like cliffs and start feeling like seams you simply stitch across. Keep the size honest. A reveal that's too big kills the effect because it leaves nothing to pursue. A reveal that's too small feels trivial and fails to change the distance you perceive. Aim for a slice that proves viability and defines the next step while still leaving meaningful work ahead. Think pilot flame, not bonfire. You want a steady ignition source that you can return to and expand predictably, session after session. The payoff is commitment that feels natural. You will notice less second-guessing and more automatic follow-through, not because you forced yourself, but because the future became visible enough to trust. That is the quiet power of a partial reveal. It turns continuation into the path of least resistance. And when the path of least resistance is progress, focus stops being a fight and starts being a habit. Salience to value. Bridge attention is easy to grab and hard to keep. Salience gets the eyes, value keeps the mind. The bridge between the two is a deliberate sequence. Trigger a clean, brief novelty cue to orient attention, then immediately hand it a concrete, meaningful micro-outcome to anchor engagement. Most people stop at novelty and burn attention without return. You will convert novelty into traction. The moment something in your environment says, "Look here," you will answer with "Do this" and prove it. That conversion is what makes focus feel stable instead of slippery. Start with a short, unmistakable salience cue to mark the beginning of a work segment. A distinct timer tone, a color shift in your editor theme, a full-screen minimal workspace, a single sticky card dropped into view. The cue's job is not to entertain you. Its only purpose is to cut through background noise and announce a state change. Then, within seconds, follow with a value anchor, a guaranteed micro-outcome already staged to complete. Paste the prepared section headers, run the ready-to-pass test, export the initial 5 seconds, reconcile the next line item. The brain orients to the cue and then receives undeniable value. That pairing teaches your attention that when the cue appears, progress follows. Over repetitions, the cue itself acquires value, pulling you into action without resistance. Keep the novelty minimal and the value explicit. Loud or overly complex cues create stimulation without direction, which fatigues attention. A clean cue plus a clear outcome is enough. Make the value anchor visible the instant it's done. If you cannot point to an artifact, your brain can't bank the win. When the win is banked, you feel a subtle drop in tension and a rise in willingness to continue. That shift is what matters. The bridge is working when the second you notice the cue, your hands already know the next move, and your eyes find the place where proof will appear. Use this bridge to neutralize common derailers. When intrusive thoughts or external distractions spike salience, don't fight the spike head-on. Introduce your cue and immediately deliver a value anchor. You are redirecting the orienting response into productive motion. If fatigue is creeping in, shrink the value anchor until it is inevitable under normal conditions, then run the cue again. The point is not to be dramatic, it's to be reliable. Reliability turns salience from a spark into a steady ignition source. Sequence matters across the session. Early in a block, keep the cue almost invisible and the value anchor strong to establish trust. Mid-block, slightly increase cue intensity when energy dips, but keep anchors tight and fast. Late in the block, reduce cue intensity again and chain 2 quick anchors back-to-back to create a natural stopping point that sets up tomorrow's entry. This modulation prevents desensitization to the cue and maintains the association that cue equals certain progress. Guard the bridge from 3 failure modes. First, novelty loops, changing tools, themes, and layouts for stimulation without delivering proof. Second, cosmetic anchors, polishing elements that don't advance the core task, which teach your brain that cues lead to fake wins. Third, delayed anchors, inserting long steps between cue and outcome, which breaks the association and brings back resistance. The remedy is simple. Keep the cue short, the anchor near, the proof visible. When you get this right, attention stops behaving like a wild signal and starts behaving like a guided beam. The cue snaps orientation into place, the anchor pays out immediately, and your system relaxes into a rhythm where continuing is easier than switching. You will notice fewer micro-arguments, cleaner re-entries after interruptions, and a calmer sense of momentum. That's the bridge doing its job. Salience opens the door, value walks you through it, and once you're on the other side, the work finally feels like it's moving itself. Time feel compression. Work feels heavier when time feels slow. The goal isn't to speed up the clock, it's to compress how time is experienced so effort feels lighter and progress arrives sooner in your perception. You do this by inserting small, strategic variations and mid-run confirmations that shorten the subjective distance between where you are and where you're going. When the brain encounters predictable, near-term proofs, it stops stretching minutes into uncertainty and starts treating the session like a sequence of short, finishable moments. That shift reduces boredom, reduces drift, and replaces the urge to escape with the urge to continue. Start by defining tight, visible horizons. Instead of working toward a vague endpoint, set immediate markers that appear every few minutes and are unmistakable when they land. A paragraph locked and timestamped, a test green-lit and logged, a clip extended to a specific duration with the quality check noted, a category cleared and annotated. These markers are not just progress, they're anchors that recalibrate your sense of duration. The moment a marker appears, your brain updates the estimate for how long the session will feel. Near wins compress time because they reduce waiting and increase closure. Layer subtle variation to prevent monotony without breaking rhythm. Rotate micro-tasks that belong to the same thread. Draft 2 sentences, verify 1 fact, refine 1 sentence, commit the change. Extend 5 seconds of video, normalize audio on those 5 seconds, export and check the timestamp, then return to extend the next 5. Reconcile 1 cluster, label, snapshot the balance. Move to the next cluster. The variety is small and purposeful. It prevents your attention from numbing out, while keeping you inside the same lane so reorientation costs stay low. You feel a steady forward motion with just enough texture to stay alert. Place confirmations precisely where time usually drags. If your energy dips at minute 8, schedule a guaranteed proof at minute 7 to carry you across the gap. If transitions stall you, pre-stage a partial reveal at the boundary between phases and trigger it right as you switch modes. The confirmation is a bridge that shortens the lull, so your perception of the session stays tight and satisfying. When lulls shrink, the entire block feels quicker, even if the clock hasn't changed. That feeling matters because it preserves engagement and makes the next block easier to start. Use visual and auditory checkpoints to make passage of progress tangible. A running note at the top of your document with stamped completions. A simple progress bar for sections completed. A counter that ticks up for each artifact generated. Each tick is a mild reward and a time compressor, signaling that you're not stuck in a long, undifferentiated stretch. You're moving through a series of short, meaningful passages. The brain loves endings and beginnings. Provide many of them, and the stretch between them stops feeling infinite. Protect the compression from two common errors. First, overvariation. If you change tools, contexts, or goals too frequently, you inflate switching costs and time expands again. Keep variation micro and within thread. Second, invisible progress. If your wins aren't recorded or visible, your brain can't count them, and time re-expands into a blur. Make every proof countable and glanceable. The more you can point to, the faster the session feels, and the easier it is to extend. End each block by staging the opening seconds of the next block, then log one clear line labeled Next Move at the top. This preserves continuity across days and compresses the time it takes to re-enter. When tomorrow starts with a certain near action, the first minute feels short, and short first minutes lead to longer, easier sessions. Over time, you'll notice a calmer pace, fewer urges to check out, and a reliable sense that work is moving at a comfortable clip. That's time-feel compression at work. Not rushing, not dragging, just a deliberate rhythm that makes effort feel light and progress feel close. Error-proofing. Focus fails for predictable reasons, and each one has a structural fix. The first failure is predictable rewards that are too large or too certain. Big, guaranteed payoffs feel good once, then stop generating traction because your brain can't be pleasantly surprised. Without small, better-than-expected moments, momentum decays. Solve this by sizing wins to be certain yet slightly richer than predicted. Lock a micro outcome you know you can deliver, then add a tiny upgrade at reveal. 1 extra sentence, 1 extra test, 5 extra seconds at target quality. The point is not to inflate the step, but to maintain the sense that continuing pays a little more than expected. The second failure is novelty without value. Flashy cues, new tools, and endless setup loops generate salience, but no progress. Attention spikes, then drops, leaving you emptier than before and more likely to chase another spike. Fix this by enforcing a rule. Every orienting cue must be followed within seconds by a visible, core progress artifact. Change your theme only if the next keystroke completes a staged step. Open a new app only if it directly produces a proof. If the cue doesn't lead to value immediately, it's a distraction wearing a costume. The third failure is oversized goals at the entry point. Ambitious targets balloon perceived cost and trigger defensive avoidance. You start negotiating with yourself, and each negotiation drains energy. The counter is a hard commitment to inevitable first moves. Define the smallest action that advances the core task and sits fully within your control. Make it so obvious you can do it while mildly distracted. Once it's done, you'll feel the price drop. Now scale 1 notch, not 10. This stair-step keeps certainty high while gently stretching capacity, which preserves the ease effect. The fourth failure is dependency-heavy steps early in the session. Waiting on approvals, data pulls, or long compiles reintroduces uncertainty and time drag. Protect the opening with zero-dependency actions that bank quick proof. If dependencies are unavoidable, pre-stage them at the end of a session, not the start, so the next entry begins with a completion instead of a stall. Leave your workspace with a primed action at the top. The command pasted, the cursor placed, the file path ready. Re-entry should feel like falling into motion, not climbing a wall. The fifth failure is invisible progress. If you cannot point to a result, your brain cannot count it, and uncounted progress might as well not exist. Solve this by making each micro-win glanceable. Use timestamps, green tags, exported clips with clear names, passing tests logged at the top of notes, before and after snapshots. Build a lightweight scoreboard that updates as you work. Seeing the count rise compresses time and reduces the urge to switch, because you feel the accumulation instead of guessing at it. The sixth failure is context bleeding. Mixing planning, drafting, editing, and polishing in the same minute bloats cognitive load and expands time. Segment modes cleanly inside your loop. For the next 7 minutes, only draft. For the 1-minute proof, only seal. For the next 7, only extend. If you need to change modes, place a partial reveal at the boundary, then switch. This preserves rhythm and prevents your mind from juggling incompatible constraints. The final failure is stopping without staging. Ending on ambiguity guarantees tomorrow starts heavy. End each block by writing a single next move line and doing its first second. Name the file, paste the command, Write the opening clause, mark the next item. This tiny action carries momentum across the gap. When you return, the first minute is short, the first win is near, and the loop spins up without drama. Error-proofing isn't about perfection. It's about building rails that make the best choice the easiest choice. Keep wins sized for slight surprise. Tie every cue to immediate proof. Start with inevitable steps. Push dependencies to the edges. Make progress visible. Separate modes. Stage the next move. Do this consistently and focus stops failing in the same old ways. It holds because you've removed the weak links that used to snap under pressure. You don't need more willpower. You need better design. You've been trying to muscle your way through tasks that feel heavy because the system around them is poorly designed. When you redesign the path so certainty is high, progress is visible, and the next move is obvious, the sensation of willpower fades into the background. What you're feeling then is not weakness leaving the body, it's friction leaving the process. The shift is practical and immediate. Small, guaranteed outcomes, staged partial reveals, tight horizons, and rhythmic confirmations. Each element lowers perceived cost and raises trust that effort will convert into results right now. Once that trust is installed, continuation becomes the default. Here's the transformation to lock in. Identity is behavior under reliable conditions. If you can consistently create conditions where starting is certain and continuing is smart, you will behave like a focused person because the environment keeps asking you to take the next obvious step. Start each session with a guaranteed micro outcome and proof it within minutes. Use a clean cue followed by immediate value to bridge attention into action. Insert a partial reveal mid-block to compress distance and renew commitment. Protect the end of each block by staging the next move so tomorrow starts with a win. This is not theory. It's a chain of engineered moments that remove the need to argue with yourself. Expect a quieter mind. As ambiguity declines, so do the micro-negotiations that used to exhaust you. Expect steadier sessions. With frequent visible confirmations, time feels shorter, and the urge to switch tasks weakens. Expect compound progress. Artifacts accumulate, handoffs get easier, re-entry is automatic, and your work starts to build on itself. The same tasks that felt like cliffs become steps you climb almost without noticing. That is the felt sense of good design, ease, continuity, and traction. Run a 3-day trial to prove it. Day 1. Implement the 90-second ease test twice to reset your entry. Day 2. Run 2 7-to-1-7 loops chained together with a mid-block partial reveal. Day 3. Replicate Day 2 and add a staged next move before you stop. Keep each proof visible and logged. By the end, review your artifacts, files created and named, tests passed and recorded, clips exported and labeled, reconciliations cleared and stamped. That review is your new story about focus, backed by evidence instead of effort myths. You don't need to become someone else to do this. You need to give your brain the conditions it was always waiting for: clarity, proximity, controllability. When those are present, the work stops feeling like a fight and starts feeling like movement. That is the moment you realize willpower was never the asset you were missing. Design was. Build the rails once, ride them every day, and let progress be the proof that your system works. This is how tasks become easier, focus becomes reliable, and results become inevitable by design, not by force.